Good afternoon, everyone. How's the sound? Can everybody hear me okay? Good. All right, great. And welcome to the Friday afternoon session of the Welty Symposium. We'll be starting in just a few minutes. Wanted to ask if you could everybody please make sure that your phones and other devices are on silent. And we should have enough distance in here so that speakers can take their masks off at the podium, but if everybody else could please make sure to keep theirs on, that would be appreciated. And I also wanted to thank the Heron Foundation for their sponsorship today. All right, so we've got a great set of speakers this afternoon. Our first speaker, Jack B. Bedell, is professor of English at Southeastern Louisiana University. He's the editor of Louisiana Literature and the director of the Louisiana Literary Press, and he has an impressive number of collections of poetry published, including within the past year, both Rock Garden and Color All Maps New. One reviewer notes that the poems in Color All Maps New offer revision and restoration, light and hope. In turns personal, ecological, cultural, and fantastic, these poems promise new maps to navigate damaged territories. During Jack Bedell's term as Poet Laureate of Louisiana from 2017 to 2019, he prioritized working with schools and young people. I think this is a passion that really shines through in his interviews. And I'd like to end with some words of his own. It is truly heartwarming for me to be present when a person realizes there's nothing more poetic than their own voice, that poetry does not have to be some kind of mysterious Rubik's Cube of symbols, and that their words and their choices of how to put those words onto a page or into the air is poetry. Please join me in welcoming Jack Bedell.
Thank you very much for that. And I'd like to thank Kendall and everyone at the university administration for putting on this wonderful event. I'm completely knocked out by the fantastic readings that we witnessed today and the presentation last night. The voice, the power, the grace in the words we've heard so far. It's so impressive and intimidating. And I just can't wait for the day to continue. For my own reading, I'd like to read a couple of brand new poems, mainly because I know that they're flawed and it might help my nerves a little bit to read something that's rough before jumping into some poems from Color All Maps New. I hope to probably read about 9 total. So I love that notion that actually gives us a counting down. That's a perfect way of doing it. And I appreciate her giving that to us. This first poem is a poem about my father who passed away a year and a half ago. And some of the ways that memory jumps back on me, my recent poems have been about restoration, as that reviewer mentioned, and about trying to find the good in the day beyond a lot of the troubles that some of us are living through in South Louisiana right now, whether it's from storm damage or from coastal erosion or from the pandemic or from our failures of government. So some of the restoration and the love I'm trying to find will come out in these poems. And particularly the way that memory serves to instigate that restoration. This first poem is called No Stream, Just Leaves. The days do. They move along, they come and go. Time's no river though, it branches in every direction at once. I made a poor man's crab boil last night to bring over to a friend's house. Its smell was so strong, my daughter ran in to ask if I remembered the time Pawpaw chased us all out the house with his boil. He put so much pepper in the pot, we had to crawl out of the house coughing like we'd been tear gassed. He just stood there in the driveway, smiling loud as can be, watching us roll around on the concrete, moaning and fussing, begging to catch our breath enough to move on. But that day is not upstream. I have not passed it by. I just need to squeeze a couple of lemon halves into my pot and give it a stir and stare off at the horizon line to breathe right back in it. Or any day, even the ones that brought phone calls so bad there wasn't nothing to do but drop the receiver on the floor and put my hands on my knees. They all jump back on you so fast, given half a chance. It's really no wonder Lazarus spent most of his time staring off into nothing after he'd gotten his breath back. This next poem is called New Beach, Elmer's Island. Some of y'all might be familiar with the projects that are going on the Gulf Coast in Louisiana. We've got a wonderful governor right now, Governor Edwards, who's putting a lot of our resource into coastal restoration, rebuilding our barrier islands. And this last storm, as bad as it was when Ida hit us, and as horrible as it was for people along the coast, their land and their property and their way of life and their culture was protected to a much larger degree than it would have been if he hadn't put so many resources into restoration of these barrier islands. And that's where this poem comes from. Elmer's Island is one of the principal islands left over when Last Island broke apart about a century and a half ago. New Beach, Elmer's Island, Caminada Headlands, 2018. Before they brought this beach back with barge after barge of sand scraped out of the Mississippi's delta, the island had melted to a thin strip of grass where waves broke hard on their way to chew mainland coast. No headland buffer to slow down the Gulf saltwater, no room to walk, nowhere for cranes to nest. This place was a hyperlapse of loss, a door not so much unlocked as off its hinges and left to rot away. Now, though, acres of shore sprawl against the Gulf, full of shorebirds. Tall dunes ready the island for the water's hot rise, storms sure to come. One island cannot stop the sinking inland or put back cemeteries and roadways washed away by tide, but it can buy us time, and all time is hope. Like that first poem, a good number of my poems, particularly in color, All Maps New, are family poems. And a lot of it has to do with kind of chewing on loss and people who've left my life, passed on, but also, you know, losing some of the land and some of the culture and some of the people and places I grew up around in South Louisiana. This is a family poem where, you know, apart from some of that stuff, I think just something that happened to me with my wife that taught me a bit about living together as a community. Hence the title. It's called Communal. Excuse me, Communal. Yesterday afternoon, my wife taught me blueberry plants come with all the parts they need to bear fruit, both male and female. To get one full of berries, though, you need to plant it right next to some blueberries from a different family. The only way they'll fill with blossoms and fruit is to cross-pollinate. Swarms of bees bring the goods from one plant to the next, and the lot grow healthy and prosper. 2 plants, a small garden, and enough bees to outlast our dog's urge to snap them out of the air as they fly from bloom to bloom. Such a simple equation, this. So sensical that togetherness, time, and a little help will fill our bowls to overflowing. I grew up in the Chapelai Basin and not too far from Henderson Swamp. And there have been few artists that captured as well as Frank Relly, the photographer. His photographs, the way they're lit and the perspective he uses, the positioning of his cameras, just feels like home. I've written a good number of poems about his work. This poem is after one of his photographs called Mesche, which is a region in Henderson. Mesche. The horizon releases just enough light to wake the surface of the lake and climb into the very top of the one cypress tree in frame so that its leaves and branches look newborn against starry sky. I know this photograph is of real place, a swamp not too far from home, but its stinginess of light raises the devil of metaphor I can't chase away with knowledge that its dark is just dark, its big sky is only sky. I tell myself, this tree is alone on the water, not loneliness. This light is fading, but isn't lost. These leaves are green because they're leaves. There's no need to say more than that. Thank you. I wouldn't say that I'm haunted by the relatives I've lost in the last few years, but I also wouldn't say that ghosts don't keep coming up in my poems. So it's something that I can't shake, and I don't think it's just because it's October. I can't seem to get away from the trope of the ghosts and how they inform moving forward. And I think that's what this poem's about. Proche, which is French for nearby. The old people say spirits of our kin linger in the marsh as blue heron. They can move only in sunlight and must dry their wings to fly, spreading them into the wind. When enough days have passed through their feathers, they can pull themselves into the air, bones light and hollow with grace. Sometimes they can circle near the places they once loved. If they find the eyes of loved ones, though, their bodies turn to mist. They swell into the night sky like the first moon. Course correction. I should probably say this isn't a recent flood. This is about the flood we had in Louisiana in 1927 that wiped out so many communities to save New Orleans. So I wouldn't want you to think any of this tragedy happened to my own family. Course correction. After the river showed up in the front yard, everything in the house began to lean. The water drew us to the front porch when it was low on its banks, pushed us toward the back walls whenever it rose at night. The first full moon yanked us toward the windowsill so fierce we had to spin the foot of our bed around to face the lapping waves. Daylight helped keep things settled enough for work to get done. Old growth timber still had to be planed for lumber and upland traps collected for winter food. Even then, the river's flow conversed in ways the woods never could, and the world would not untilt itself, whether the moon waned new or no. So I don't know why I picked this. I picked this poem and it has like a paragraph entry quoted from the New York Times. And I'm just going to summarize it for y'all instead of killing y'all with reading from the New York Times. But it's about, some of you may know the Ile de Jean Charles story, climate refugees who the federal government has paid to move off their island because it's been 90% of it has faded away. It's eroded over from storms and from being unprotected from the Gulf. And in the move, there are many meetings bureaucrats have held, and I do have to read this quote from the chief of the homeless tribe, Chief Nakan. They asked him what he wanted out of this, and after he kind of rubbed his face in the press conference, he said, I'd like a live buffalo on site. And they took him literally about that when it was fairly clear to me or anyone from Terrebonne Parish that he was kind of mocking their concern for his tribe. And they completely missed the tone of that in the reporting. And that's what made this poem happen, Ile de Jean Charles. And it's sort of written from Chief Nakan's perspective. Forget about the taut line stretched between forefinger and cast net. Forget about the densities of family and of time binding old ones to babies just learning to walk. Forget about the days spent working together after countless storms, salvaging the whole island's memories, spreading them out to dry in the sun. When the water finally takes the last 10% of this island, think only of Island Road, how that road once offered the one way to school or town or places past the horizon. Soon enough, there'll be no way back along that road. Anyone who drives around the barricade on the mainland will find waves at the end of Blacktop, gulls floating over the ghosts of rooftops, wind where there once was song. What more buffer could be built between here and there than this loss? What more to ease the tension of others? a live buffalo perhaps, but no one could guarantee the animal would care to go on living so far from its rolling plains, or that it could stomach our mainland's sharp grass. A couple more. I don't know if anybody's seen any photographs or the actual document of Coltrane's score for Love Supreme. I was at the last New Orleans writing marathon that we held in person, and a musician friend of mine showed me a photograph of that score. And I don't know what I was expecting to see, but having been raised a musician myself, I kind of expected notes in the score, and that's not what it is. There are only a half dozen notes on that score. It's mostly Coltrane's notes about spirituality and about harmony and about learning to live and breathe together. And how if we let things ride, if we're all moving in the right direction and we let things ride, then we'll find harmony at some point. And that was the instruction to his ensemble. And that's the spawn of this poem. It's called Prayer Does Not Have to. Prayer does not have to whisper with reverence while clouds thicken to purple in the sky. It can percolate, chortle, and climb like Coltrane's horn in a long Love Supreme, probing in fits and squawks, clearing a path upwards, then knocking over all stones until there is no right of way, no safe passage, nothing but timpani and bass drowning all hope and distance. I've been in that room where it's clear the storm is on its way, where light diminishes its chord until harmonies fall off each other, breathless. Let the thunder have its say. Open a door to the sizzling wind. Trust the score to give each note space, each need voice, until the whole room vibrates in halftones, raises itself into the sky. This loud song can find a stable key. This kind of noise can beg light down with a cymbals roll. I finished with this one about my daughter. One blessing of being locked down last year was little traditions that popped up, and one of them was afternoon walks that I took with my daughter. Whenever the sons weren't sleeping, they would come, but mainly my daughter would come with me. And this happened, and I couldn't let it go. It's summer botany lesson. No matter how many blossoms I point out exploding overhead on our neighborhood walk, my daughter isn't buying it. She's in love with the sound of bougainvillea. Thinks the word's so pretty, there's no way it stands for something real. She believes I made it up, strung long vowels on kissy soft consonants on a strand of rhythm to make her giggle. I wish I could tell a story that would win her faith, but I learned to let it lie. Some truths beg for a fight. Some would rather echo on branches in crooked light while you just walk off holding hands. Happy to answer any questions that y'all might have.
Hi, Jack.
Hi.
Hi.
It is the voice of God. You're all
embodied
right.
voice. I'm Alana. I'm in the MFA program here at UW, and I really, it's my first introduction to your poetry, and I really enjoy your work. There's a meticulousness to the way that you use words that I really appreciate. You start off course correction with after the river showed up in the front yard, everything in the house began to lean. And it's staggering. It's such a staggering image. And so I'm wondering for you, where do your poems begin?
Oh, thank you. That's a wonderful question. And thank you for the kind comments about my work. Almost always it begins with a story that I've heard from family or friends, or an image that I've seen. And when that nags at me long enough, particularly reading accounts of that 1927 flood and how it decimated people's lives and how they couldn't stop living, they had to keep on, which I take some I'm optimistic when I hear stories about how people had to keep going and they had to live on and had to find the good on the other end of it. When that happens, then I feel kind of compelled to write poems about it, and not necessarily to archive it, but to ask questions and to try to grope my way toward understanding some level of what the people involved would have understood, or what my own family would have understood, or what I can gain from it. I hope that gets close to answering.
Yeah, yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And how are you, family, and your friends doing after Isaac?
Well, my brother is my last remaining family member, and he took it fairly hard. His house was a little torn up, but they're doing well. The rest of the parish and Lafourche Parish and St. Charles down the bayou are not doing well. There are people living in tents outside of their home begging FEMA for assistance, and it's 2.5 months out from the storm, and we did fine. We were out of power for 3 weeks, but it was a heck of a camping trip in my own house.
Do you think you'll be ready to write about it anytime soon, or on that?
I know I'll be ready to write when my part of the world comes back better, and we right some wrongs. Remember some inequities in how land and goods and housing and other resources were distributed in that area. And so when hopefully we get it right when we put it back. And that's my hope, that on the other side of that, I'll be writing the praise of people who put it back right. Thank you. Sure.
Kind of piggybacking on the question about your beginning, what I noticed is that your dismount from the poem is always so easy and yet so impactful. Like it was hard for me to even go into the next poem when we finished, because I was like, wait, I'm still trying to, get that last part. It was so beautiful. So how do you just slide out with such profound endings? What's the process?
Well, thank you. I'm probably blushing from her saying that. The two hardest things for me ever are titling and closure. And I think for similar reasons, because titling either is so literal that it's of no use to the poem, or it's so misleading, or it's so symbolic that it's no use to the poem. And closure is really similar to me, because I have a tendency toward, in life, repeating myself or moralizing or trying to sum up. And I don't want to ever do that in a poem. One of my teachers, Miller Williams, used the only principle he ever taught me was that when you write a line, you can't write any better than just quit. And so I do try to follow his advice when I come to that, when I know that I would just be repeating myself, or that I can't improve on that image, the resonance of that, then I do just leave the poem and hope that it'll resonate in the right way more often than it doesn't. I know that doesn't really answer the question. I've also found that the shorter poems that I write, the more frightening that is. Because the longer the poem is, the chances are I'm going to cover the bases I need covered. But in a short poem, so much is invested in individual images, delivering what it is, whether it's feeling or whether it's understanding that I'm trying to communicate. It's so difficult to have faith in a short poem. I just love the confidence of writers that traffic in 4 and 6 line poems. I don't have it. Anyone else? Thank y'all so much. I appreciate the attention, and I can't wait to hear the rest of the event. Thank y'all.
we'll be hearing from one more speaker and then having a brief break for coffee, and if anybody wants to have a minute or two to step out afterwards. So our next speaker is Annette Saunook Clapsaddle. She's a teacher at Swain County High School in North Carolina and a member of the Board of Trustees for the North Carolina Writers Network. She's also an enrolled member of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians and a former executive director of the Cherokee Preservation Foundation. Her novel, Even As We Breathe, was chosen as one of NPR's best books of 2020. And I'd say it's very well deserved. This is an absolutely gripping historical novel. I read it in about 2 hours. Really found it very difficult to stop. In the words of a reviewer from Publishers Weekly, the clear, crisp prose comes consistently as the intricate story easily moves along. Both an astonishing addition to World War II and Native American literature, this novel sings on every level. Please welcome Annette Saunook Clapsaddle.
Thank you, Kendall. Thank you, everyone at the university for having me here today. I'm excited to be here. And as mentioned, I am also a high school English teacher. So I know it's about fourth period at my school after lunch, which means my students are falling asleep. So at any point today, if you feel a little tired, feel free to stand up, walk about. I am totally used to it. It won't bother me at all. I understand. I have just been floored by the writers that are here yesterday, today, into tomorrow. Just such talent, and I'm humbled to be able to share a stage with these folks. It's interesting. I've only been to Mississippi one other time in my life, and it was because of that experience. That experience resulted in the first publication I ever had in my life. I was in middle school and thought I could write about Mississippi, and I can't. But it's been great to hear all of these talented writers speak about where they are from in such an authentic and real way. And so I also tend to speak about where I am from. And you'll see this in what I share with you today, but just wanted to mention I am from Western North Carolina, Cherokee, North Carolina. It's the Qualla boundary. And this is also a humbling experience for me because I am the first published novelist from my tribe. We are the only federally recognized tribe in the state of North Carolina, and we have never had a published novelist. So it is an honor to share part of our story with you. And as someone said earlier, I'm not the only voice of my tribe. And so I just hope to share a little piece of our collective voice with you today. I also was thrilled to be asked to speak at this conference because I have a bet with my best friend. And I don't know really why this started, but we bet who can use the word confluence in interviews the most or in events the most. And I completely have him beat now that I am at a symposium that has confluence in the title. So I'll talk confluence all day. But it really is, this story came about because of confluence. The story takes place the summer of 1942, partly at the Grove Park Inn in Asheville, North Carolina, and partly on the Qualla boundary in Cherokee, North Carolina. In 1942, the Grove Park Inn, which is a pretty upper class resort, held access diplomats and foreign nationals as prisoners of war just for one summer. And it's a history that most people don't know about. And I grew up and have lived in Cherokee my whole life and had never heard this story. And Asheville today is only about an hour away from Cherokee. So it was unusual that I didn't know this history. But what I did know, what I had learned in college, was that some Japanese internment camps were out west were set up on Indian reservations or near Indian reservations. And I always thought that was an interesting thing to think about how quickly those reservations turned into prisons. And so to compare that to the Grove Park Inn and how quickly it turned into a prison, I knew it was an opportunity to talk about things like race and class and belonging and labeling and citizenship. And so I could not resist the opportunity to take that piece of history and bring my protagonist, a young Cherokee man named County, from what's called the reservation, technically isn't, but from the reservation to that setting in a time of war and just see what happens. And so County is eventually accused of being involved in the disappearance of a diplomat's daughter, and he has to prove his innocence and also unravel a family mystery. And he is joined by Essie Stamper, a young woman from Cherokee. So that's really the only background you need to know, because I think I'll start with the prologue, and that will give you enough background. About the place, when I take you there or when you find it on your own, just know what the old folks say is true. This land is ours because of what is buried in the ground, not what words appear on a paper. But also know this, what is buried in the ground isn't always what you think. It's just the beginning. It's the beginning of the story, the beginning of all of us who call ourselves Homo sapiens. Fitting, I guess, that what I found buried, just as I was trying to figure out how to become a man and still be human, was the very thing that threatened to take it all away. Just when I began to see what taking control of my own life might look like, I realized I was not who I thought, and neither was this place. That summer in 1942, when I met her, really met her, before I found myself in a white man's cage and entangled in the barbed wire that destroyed my father, I left the cage of my home in Cherokee, North Carolina. I left these mountains that both hold and suffocate and went to work at the pinnacle of luxury and privilege, Asheville's Grove Park Inn and Resort. I guess I convinced myself I could become fortunate by proximity, escape Uncle Bud's tirades and my grandmother Leishy's empty kitchen cabinets just by driving a couple of hours up the road. It sounded good to tell folks I was raising money for college, but the truth was I didn't know what I was doing. I just didn't want to do it there anymore. And if I stayed any longer, I would become rooted so deeply, I might as well have been buried. My plan didn't quite work the way I thought it would. When I got to the resort, I mostly stayed outside, cut the trees, mowed the grass, and helped to dig holes that would sink signs and posts for barbed wire fences. Music occasionally seeped from the ballroom, but was muted by thick lead pane windows before one note ever reached the perimeter of the property. That's where I first found the bone. I was on my hands and knees pitching rocks and digging holes. It was just as the inn, like its music, was becoming dulled by wartime restrictions and hushed by lead bullets. The prisoners, who were actually diplomats and foreign nationals treated more like guests, weren't really known to me yet. That little girl, God bless her soul, had barely even stepped foot on the property, and I was still as free as I would ever be. I squatted there by the fence along the boundary of the Grove Park property and grasped the bone by its middle, pointing both ends upward, studying its curvature, a bent bauble for my idle adolescent hands to fidget with, in absence of a ball stick or a soldier's rifle. I can't recall playing with many toys as a child. That's probably why the bone spoke poetry to me as a young man. It was smooth and porous, its slight C curve angled in motion, calling to be grasped, used, a weapon at least in some primitive function of strength, like a subhuman scythe, though innately human, maybe even the very core of humanity. And now, as I recall that moment out loud, it was an embarrassing indulgence of make-believe for a 19-year-old. It's all right to laugh, I don't blame you. Such an extraordinary object to be inside flesh. It was wholly earthen, not sterile or cellular. It was natural in a way we pray our body is not, momentary, seasonal, destined for expiration. The bone had lost its story, petrified into a mere alkaline deposit, transient and nameless. I was immediately spellbound by this calcified opportunity to embrace a remnant of life's existence in one hand, dry it, dust it, preserve it, and listen. Buried by a story, and I was the only one on this earth privileged to hear it. County. It seemed to coo my name like the beautiful girls in my daydreams, the ones who never took interest in boys like me. Just as I was yet to know of a certain beautiful girl's power, I was yet to understand the power that bone would wield over my life. I was yet to know how much more I would risk for her, for it. I am bits and pieces of the people I meet, my teacher once told me. Though more accurately, I am of people and places and creatures. And so because of that summer and that war and that small hollow relic, I am bits and pieces of a grand estate and a half-tame primate and a dozen accents and a missing girl and a fearful girl and all the trees and mountains and asphalt in between. And you, well, I reckon you will be too soon enough. Knowing that she is now gone from this earth, all I'm left to do is wonder what remains of her here. For me, for anyone who knew or didn't know her. What happens to the memories? How long do they survive? I can still see her dancing, head thrown back laughing. If there's one thing old age has taught me, it's that there are many kinds of love. She taught me that sometimes we feel many different kinds with one person. And now it seems possible that love is the only thing that will outlive us all, but only if we continue to tell its story. So as I mentioned, place is really important to me in writing. And since, the South is a very diverse place. And when the book came out, I was sometimes asked if I considered myself a Southern writer. I always consider myself a Southern writer. But sometimes the Appalachian region is thought of very differently than the rest of the South. So I wanted to give you a quick sense of place before I talk more about a monkey, which I think is always important to talk about a monkey when given the opportunity. So. This is just a short excerpt from chapter 1. Except for the valley land that began pimpling with impoverished storefronts, Cherokee was not the Cherokee of today. Cherokee was mud-chinked log cabins buried into mountain hollows, surprising expanses of neat garden rows jutting across rare unwooded land at the end of roughly carved dirt roads, half washed away in the spring and summer and impassable with snow in the winter. No matter where human life chose to carve its mark on the land, it did not stray far from water, creek, river, stream, or fall. Follow one and you would find Cherokee. You would find the smoke from wood stoves. You would find red clay ground into fine ginger dust coating the surface of life. And if you could not find it, and you could not find it directly from any highway, to trust a road is still a road when it looks like a creek is not and has never been for the tourist heart. Yet it is only that trust that will get you from a road sign to a home, or in my case, from Leashy's where I lived to Bud's where I worked. Bud's cabin was short of breath, strangled by the dust of his daily existence and by the humid draft of his lungs. He was the only man I knew whose sweat seemed to flow simultaneously from the pores of his body and the foulness of his words. I grabbed the besom from beside the front door and walked out to sweep the porch. The indigo bunting reminded me that the merging of the forest's stillness and its interruption marked by fierce velocity, was what made the woods the wilderness. Hovering just outside Hawthorne's darkness, though less romantic than Sherwood Forest, it was a wood not yet known in literature or picture shows. Now, I know what you must be thinking. That all sounds starry-eyed, maybe even romantic. But that's why you need the stories of this place. No outsiders seem to know what I knew, what we know about these woods. Few outsiders knew the contradictions of poison oak and healing salves growing side by side, or the way in which grapevines have nothing to do with eating and so much to do with flying. And that, well, that was fine by me then, but you will need to know. I was also one of the few who recognized old man Zodzy's capuchin monkey, Edgar, simply by the way the tree branches bent overhead. Zodsy, or George, his English name, was one of those fixture characters many of us have known in our childhood. He was a man who never seemed to age nor would ever die. As a child, I was perpetually nervous in his presence, fearful he could see deep to the root of my motivations and ambitions and judge them ceaselessly without saying a word. One sideways glance from the old man and I was transformed. I never actually saw him move from one place to the other, now that I think about it. I can't recall when or how I met him or when I decided we should go on conversing like lifelong friends. Of course, there were lots of folks like that back then. Formal introductions weren't needed, just like I never introduced myself to the stream below my house or my great aunts that I saw maybe once or twice in my lifetime. Some people just seem to always have existed within our own sphere of being, indefinable by common terms of friendship or familial relationship. Just people, peopling our world. And of course, I still laugh to think that such an apathetic man cared for a ridiculous monkey named Edgar. But as a child, it all made perfect sense. Edgar's leap caused the limbs of the trees to dip much lower than a squirrel's jump, though he was also far less clumsy than the woodland flyers. He made very little noise. Zodsy insisted it was because he was deaf. I wasn't so sure about that because I couldn't figure how a monkey could survive the panthers if he couldn't hear them sneaking up on him. I'd never heard that monkeys have a strong sense of smell. I'm pretty certain Edgar was quiet because Edgar had to be quiet to survive. I know a little something about that. Often standing on the porch, even though I could not see his tiny black, brown, and white body, I could see his path zigzagging back to Zodzy's place over the hill. Pines bending, oak leaves dancing, maples swaying, as if a strong gust of wind had managed to coil its way within the confines of the forest. His movement was in such congruence with the treetops, I couldn't help but feel he was naturally meant to be there. I guess it's safe to say the old man was the only one around who kept a monkey as a pet, and the only monkey owner in the whole wide world who thought it perfectly natural to let said pet roam at will. Edgar caused more than one hunter to go into near cardiac arrest a time or two. But more folks in the area by then knew to be on watch for him and would relay sightings to Zodsy so he wouldn't worry. Not that he was prone to worrying. A few years back, while I was up at his place helping to split wood, the old man sitting on a stump rolling cigarette after cigarette told me how he came to acquire Edgar. It seems the carnival was making its way through Cherokee one summer, early 30s, late 20s, something like that. The carnival wasn't stopping here for a show because no one in Cherokee had any money anyway, but sometimes it would set up camp for performers to rest before moving on to another show for a week, to another town for a week of shows. Edgar was a trained tightrope walker, wore a top hat and tiny red vest. Unfortunately, he also had a problematic tendency to lift ladies' skirts and nip at children who tried to pet him. The carnival manager kept him in a minuscule metal cage for those reasons. Weren't fit for a possum, Zodsy shook his head, thinking back. Zadzi told me that one day while the carnies were in camp, he went down to see if they might be interested in buying some wild greens or deer jerky. They paid a fair price for fresh goods. He told me that the place looked pretty deserted. So he eased his way into one of the larger circus tents for a look-see. When he saw Edgar for the first time, the monkey was clenching the bars of his cage and shaking the entire structure so hard that the bottom kept lifting from the ground. As Edgar saw Zadzi enter the tent and approach his cage, Edgar just stopped. And as Zadzi says, though who's to know what's really true, he began to grin like a fool at Zadzi and calmed right down. It all seems like a crazy story to me and probably you now, but the old man did tell me something I took to heart. We were sitting outside the trading post on a split log bench. I sipped RC Cola, desperate to cool off from the walk down the mountain, and he, as he always did, seemed to have been sitting there his whole life. I took a long drink as Zadzi picked up the story at its midpoint. And right then I knew what I had to do. See, Pap used to tell me about sneaking down to the stockade and taking food to his older brother and his family right before they moved him west during the removal. He used to tell me that the government had made an animal of his brother and that he knew he could never get caught or he'd become one too. So he hid out in the mountains and later stayed with family who'd been traded a small piece of land because freedom was worth more than life. And that's why old man Zadzi never left the Kuala boundary. Never left the Kuala boundary either, and how he came to end up with a capuchin monkey named Edgar, who I'm guessing he just up and stole because Zadzi wasn't much for negotiations with white folk. I asked him once why he'd named him Edgar. He told me that he named him for Edgar Allan Poe. I don't know what I think about that. Wouldn't have suspected Zadzi to even read Poe. But then again, Zadzi didn't seem to fit into molds so easily. Now, as for Edgar, he was even more adventurous than Zadzi and loved to explore, and that's why he nearly sent quite a few people to an early grave. Edgar had been seen as far away as Tennessee and Georgia. He always made his way back to Zadzi, though. He might be gone for a whole month, but he'd come ambling into Zadzi's cabin, hungry as hell, no worse for the wear. So I think Zadzi saw no point in keeping him tied or locked up. And the rest of us got to enjoy having our very own capuchin monkey hanging out in our woods. We didn't even have to go to the zoo for a taste of the exotic. Ever since I could remember, I wanted to escape Cherokee. And that feeling of suffocation just kept growing with my body. But just as I was about to finally get out, at least for a summer, I felt as if I was rushing carelessly out of the woods, saw briars pricking my bare forearms and legs, leaving trickles of blood to mix with sweat of haste. I started thinking of all the things I would miss, like ripe berries left on the bush, Leishy's hand over her mouth when she got tickled, the way mist rises from the Oconaluftee as if sighing at the rising sun, the chattering of indigo buntings, and a place where a monkey could scamper across oak and maple limbs like a tightrope performer. If I thought too much about the sweetness of my place in the world, I might never be able to leave it. And I think I have a few more minutes for reading. So this is just a portion that cracks me up and I enjoy reading it. But it also explains the relationship between Essie and County. And they have, while they go to work at the Grove Park that summer, they have found a room that nobody really knows about. And they kind of just use it as a place to hang out. And they create their own culture there, actually. So they're in the room in this scene. I'll read this. The other thing I will say that I find interesting about Edgar the monkey, Edgar is actually, there's a real story of a monkey who was roaming around the Smoky Mountains. But after the book came out, a gentleman from Asheville sent me an email, and he told me that there actually was a monkey that belonged to a store owner in Asheville during this time. And local kids would go down to the store and see the monkey and kind of play with the monkey. And this is horrific. Then they would go up to the Grove Park, which is kind of up on a hill. And when the prisoners would come out into the yard, the kids would climb the fence and act like monkeys, mocking them. That was something I didn't know before I wrote the book, but it's just one of those horrible alignments with fiction. This is a little more lighthearted. So this is from Essie and County in the room, and they'll be quick. There are no snapshots of that summer, literal or otherwise, that refuse to fade, not because they are fantastic or even significant, but because they are elemental to what is now my existence. Maybe what is Essie's too. Essie was likely the most proper girl I'd ever met, and most certainly the most sophisticated girl from Cherokee. She fit into 447, that's the room number, like one of the first edition novels we found there. And because she fit, I fit by association. Adopted into some modern clan by the clan mother herself. Mind you, that is where the maternal instincts began and ended. Essie corrected no more than my grammar on occasion. Quite the opposite. She led me to dangle on the edge of complete and utter failure and spin wildly in the awkwardness of it, dancing in delight at my blush. Go ahead, cow pie, I'll spot you, she encouraged. And before I remember who I was, I found myself upside down, attempting to walk across the length of the room on my hands. I crashed gleefully into the couch, unable to spare my breath from laughter's thievery. Essie, too, was unable to remain on her feet, overcome with amusement. She sank into the oversized leather chair and vibrated in a nearly silent, wheezing laughter until the clearest expression of the word squirrel eked from her. I sat up, imagining that a varmint had joined our evening reverie. She too sat erect, but she was blushing, eyes wide and hand over her mouth. Squirrel? I repeated, where? Essie didn't answer. Her eyes fell. It was clear that I had not actually heard what I thought I had. Did you just... She didn't move. Essie Stamper, did you just pass wind? Cow pie, shut your mouth. You did. Hush, you did. Counting Sequoia, one does not speak like that to a lady. Well, most ladies don't speak through their backsides. She fell into herself, hawing loudly. I know, right? I couldn't help it. You got me so tickled. It sounded just like you said squirrel, or more like you said squirrel. I couldn't finish. I convulsed into the joy of her humanity. Stop it, cow pie. You keep this up and I'll call up a whole mess of squirrels, an out and out scurry of squirrels. Essie was always teaching me new words, most of which she likely found on the shelves of 447. My favorite word, though, of all the fancy, sophisticated, highfalutin words was cow pie. I know it sounds strange that I would want an attractive girl like Essie calling me a pile of cow manure, but even cow pies attract beautiful butterflies, delicate and indifferent to the stench of refuse. Thank you. So we've got time for questions. I'm happy to take questions.
Hi, this is Trish Evans. I'm in the MFA program, and clearly I'm on Zoom. I'm not talking from the great beyond.
Oh, darn. I was hoping I was having a moment. Okay.
Well, we can try. Okay. So I used to live on Bainbridge Island, Washington, which was where the first people were removed and put in the internment camps by the presidential order. And it's fascinating to me that you chose that topic. How did you stumble on that story? That is just so fascinating to me.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I mentioned early on, kind of jokingly, that it was a confluence of things that came to this story. I had read in the Asheville Citizen-Times newspaper an article on Asheville's role during World War II. And I think it came out right after the movie Monuments Men was released. And the Asheville paper was talking about the Biltmore House and how they had safeguarded works of art during that time. But there was a little paragraph about the Grove Park's role. And I just found it really interesting because I had never heard that history before. And I started asking some local historians. My husband actually is a historian, and no one was aware of that story, which is exciting for me as a fiction writer, because that meant that I had a little bit more latitude with where I wanted to go with the story. And I knew that I wanted to talk about citizenship and belonging, and that setting really just drove everything. I didn't set out to write about World War II. That would never be something that I would intend to do. But the place, the setting of the geographical place, and then also just the time period, really allowed itself to be analyzed for what it has to say about us today. So I kind of joke that I never thought it never sunk in with me that I was writing historical fiction until I had signed my contract and was working on the marketing plan with my press. It never felt like historical fiction to me because I was so interested in the themes of the book, in how we label people, and how we decide when and where people belong. And so it was, it's a big deal for the story that it was set at the Grove Park as a site of a prison. But it really just happened to facilitate the larger discussion that I wanted to have. Thank you for your question. I hope that answers it.
Thank you, it did.
Hi, Annette. This is Alana in the MFA program as well with Trish. And can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I had a moment where I wasn't sure where the voice was coming from. And now
first of all, I want to say that your writing is absolutely beautiful. It's full of really lush imagery, and it's quite lyrical. So I was wondering, do you write poetry as well?
I write, as my friend says, very bad love poetry that no one will ever see. But thank you for that. I love reading poetry, and I love language in general. So I would never consider myself a poet. Although the publication that I referenced early on, the first publication I had in middle school, was a poem. But that's probably the extent of it. I do have, actually, I should take that back. I do have a poem coming out fairly soon, but it's not what I practice, and I am in awe of poets.
Okay. So then my question is sort of piggybacking off what Trish asked a little bit, and it's two parts. The first part is when you are writing from a historical perspective, and given that you are coming from writing about Cherokee culture and history, how do you find a way in to crafting your own mythology in your fiction? Like, if that makes sense. So finding a place where you are being true to the story as it is historically known, but also allowing yourself to, as you described with County and Essie, have them develop their own culture in that room. How do
Yeah,
you find that space?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That's a great question. You know, there is a little bit of a struggle because I think when I write, whether it be fiction or nonfiction, there's a part of me that knows that I have to do a little teaching. So many people are so unfamiliar with Native history and specifically as well Eastern Band Cherokee history. So it is, you know, whether right or wrong, it is a responsibility that I feel I have to kind of balance that and make sure that I'm providing history as accurately as possible, which, you know, it's never perfect. But I've also lived in this place that I write from my whole life. And you know, I'm of this community. And so that is, you know, that community is who I am most responsible to. And so I make sure that I can hear that voice in my head when I'm writing, that it's not, when I tell the history, I guess I should say it this way, when I tell the history of this place, it is not the history that you will find necessarily in a school history book. It may be similar, but I want to make sure that I'm telling it the way I heard it from community members growing up, the way I feel it living there. And there's a part of you have to feel that history in place. And, you know, I kind of joke about this, but there was a lot of latitude and I could stretch using fiction because there's not a lot of archival material about the Grove Park specifically during this summer. And it makes sense, you know, why there weren't reporters there or anything like that. There is a little bit of material. So I got to spend time looking at pictures, seeing what culture was like in the archives, looking at kind of what culture was like surrounding the Grove Park during this time. I think somebody else mentioned this, but just kind of knowing what the cultural context was where my research was. But it's so important for me to feel the story, to feel the place in the body. That sounds a little bit weird, but I guess that's how I maintain that or balance that mythology, is that it has to look the same, you know, in a textbook, that I know it feels like in the bodies of the people who are descendants of that history.
That's fantastic. I love how you describe that. And I might have to write about your book for my short essay. So for school, I love that. And then the last question I have is it's really about County. Like, how did you find him? How did he come to be?
Yeah. You know, I don't know. I think when I write, I hear that voice. I don't initially, and then I kind of mine that character. But I'll say a few things that I know led to it. One, I have an older brother. I had a lot of friends growing up, guy friends growing up, that as adults have done incredible things. As teenagers, they drove their parents crazy. My parents did not know if my brother was going to survive like his 20s, definitely his high school years. But he was smart. He definitely had the potential for an incredible future, but he didn't play school, right? Like, you know, there's lots of kids that just don't play school. It's not the system for them to thrive. And I saw a lot of my friends growing up. I went to a public school. So there's a school in Cherokee on the Qualla boundary where most Cherokee students go, but then the surrounding counties have about 30% population of Cherokee students. Anyway, when I was growing up, I went to a public school in one of the counties, and I watched my Cherokee male friends be treated so poorly and not given the chances that other young men in our school were given. And so that's always bothered me. And so I had that voice kind of in my head of wanting a character who has so much potential, who may not do school in the traditional sense, but I wanted him to be able to get a chance. And so I think that that's really where that came from. And I'll say the other thing that I think is important, because I need to give a nod to this incredible author. I teach in one of my classes, I teach Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me, and that voice and that memoir changed my life as a writer, especially, but just as a human being. And so when I was really thinking about voice, I love the intimacy of a memoir to a son. And so I was thinking about what I could do in fiction with that speaking to someone. So I'm grateful to his voice as well.
Hi, Ms. Clapsaddle. My name is Dana, and I'm in the MFA program. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Very good. I had a question about who your literary influences were, your heroes or heroines. And then secondly, I was curious what you're most proud of with regard to your book.
Oh, okay. Well, I would say my influences, it's kind of funny to be in Mississippi for me. This is the first time I've been back since like middle school, but Faulkner has always been an influence, and sometimes I have to give a little caveat with that, but it was he was one of the first writers that shook my brain up in that way around words. And I wasn't introduced to Native authors until a little bit later. So currently though, Louise Erdrich is a Native writer who I think is one of the best writers writing today. And then I also rely heavily, my influences change constantly, I should say that, but I rely heavily on what I teach my students. So as I mentioned, Ta-Nehisi Coates, I'm teaching God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy right now. Toni Morrison. I could talk forever about writers. But a lot of the traditional Southern writers were who I was exposed to growing up, white men mostly. And it wasn't really until high school, a little bit later, that I was reading other writers that had an influence. And I'm speaking around this because I'm trying to avoid the second question because it gets me teared up when I answer this question. So I'm trying to keep it together. But the proudest moment for this book was that I got to share the process with my students of rejection, like all the way through. And I would read to them emails that I got like from agents that were sending me rejection letters and things. And anyway, after the book came out, some students I had graduated and were in college. And one of the mothers of a former student screenshotted a text she received from her son. Her son is a member of our tribe, and he's at UNC Chapel Hill right now. And he had sent her a text that said, I just finished Annette's book. And she said, well, what'd you think? And he said, Mama, I've never seen anybody like me in a book before. And I think that was life-changing for me. And so it doesn't matter what anybody else says, it doesn't matter awards or whatnot, but to know that my students and, this generation of young Cherokee men won't be treated like the ones I grew up with that kind of pushed for county's voice to begin with. So thank you for that question. I think I've not wept yet, so.
Thank you, ma'am.
You've already sort of answered my question. I was going to ask what has been the reaction from your tribe, but you told the story. I don't want you to cry. Just move on, and I'll say that's amazing. Congrats, thank you for what you've done.
Thank you. Yeah, I will say for the tribe larger than just students, I always said that if I can walk in to Food Lion, which is the only grocery store we have, if I can walk into Food Lion and not get nervous, right, that somebody's going to say something negative to me, then I've done my job. So it has been well received, and I've had a lot of support from my tribe. And I'm just really grateful for that as well. Hopefully, that means that some other writers from our tribe will be able to take the risk that being a writer requires sometimes. Thank you. Oh, you have a question?
Yes, I have another question.
Okay.
Hi, Annette, how are you?
I'm good.
Beautiful reading, thank you so much. Like, for instance, with counterposing it to my wife, Angela Jackson Brown, this counter narrative, how much of that fits in with your storytelling in changing the narrative for non-Indigenous people that have a deeper understanding of what it is to live in time and place?
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. Well, I will say that, you know, storytelling for us traditionally is another reason why I chose this voice. You know, storytelling is how we learn, and it's a mentorship for our tribe. You really, traditionally, you don't learn things by reading it in a book. Somebody talks you through this process. And so, you know, things evolve in different ways. And so now books are kind of taking on that role to reach more people. But, you know, one of the things that was important to me was to push back against some stereotypes. And I don't want to take up too much time because I can talk about this a lot. But so real quick instance, in Native literature, especially since most of it wasn't written by Native people, there's a stereotype that Natives are magic or spiritual, or we can talk to animals. And I'm working on it, but apparently it's not going well. I don't know. So I push back against things like that in the book. So I like to draw them up so that a reader thinks this is where this is going, and then kind of push back against it. So Edgar is in the book largely as a way to say that if evolutionary science accepts the fact that we are related to primates in some way, then why is it so weird that we have a relationship with bears in our culture, that we believe that they are closely related to humans, that there used to be a clan that were the bear clan because they're almost human-like? Why is that magical and evolutionary science not magical, right? So I try to do things like that, that draw in both narratives and kind of put them beside each other, that hopefully a reader will catch on to that. Sometimes they don't. They're just like, oh, Edgar was great. So, yeah. I hope that answers your question. All right, I think I've taken. Thank you.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Just please take a moment to make sure that any devices are silenced before we begin again. And we have one more speaker this afternoon before I turn things over to my colleague Kendall Dunkelberg, who will be announcing the Ephemera Prize. And our last speaker today is Kendra Allen, who is a poet and essayist from Dallas, Texas. A New York Times reviewer writes of her recent poetry collection, gospel traditions, erotic need, African-American vernacular English, and plenty of blank space on well-organized pages come together in the collection plate. Water and swimming and baptism, worship and blasphemy describe an America in which Black lives ought to matter, but, as in the Flint, Michigan water crisis, they may not. Kendra Allen is also the author of a forthcoming memoir, Fruit Punch, and a collection of essays, When You Learn the Alphabet. And I read the title essay on her website, and I was just blown away by how much it read like poetry. She's got a way of using language that's incredibly compact, evocative, and powerful. I think you'll enjoy it very much. Please welcome Kendra Allen.
Okay, hi y'all. I'm Kendra. First of all, thank you, Kendall, for having me here. What everybody said, I'm so thankful to the university. Last time I was here, it was me reading essays, and this time I'm reading poetry. So, you know, I'm gonna try this thing out. Feel free to laugh. Don't be sad. Like I might be reading about sad things, but you know, we're past that. You know, we're here to laugh and smile and enjoy each other. I'm so honored to be on this lineup with all these amazing writers and like amazing people, which is more important than being an amazing writer. So I really like just honor like being in that space. Okay, so I'm going to read a few poems from the collection plate. I'm not necessarily sure how many because I have commitment issues and I may like just change my mind up here last minute. All you need to know is like this book centers around water and around like the Black Southern church tradition. I would say that more than religion. And if you know, especially like small Southern Black churches. And so a lot of that culture is in these pieces that I'm reading, as well as like this reoccurring character of our father, and our father in the literal sense of like an actual father, but also as like a deity, a God. And you know, insert whichever one feels important to you in that moment. That's the great thing about poetry. You know, you can make it mean what you want to mean. So if you ask me what that meant, I'm just gonna be like, I don't be knowing. I don't know. Target over it. Okay. So the first poem, I didn't even start my timer because I'll talk through this entire thing. All right, so the first poem I'm going to read is called Evening Service. All you really need to know is it's about me being baptized at 8 years old. I grew up in my great uncle's Southern Black Baptist church in Dallas, Texas, where I went every other day for like, literally like every other day for like 16, 17 years of my life. And the moment I got free, I was like, whew, I need 16 more years of like, no, none of this. Okay, so it's called Evening Service. When it's time for the invitation, we say, Our Father. Today is a blessed one. Walk to the front of the altar in my pretty printed please you dress, socks with the ruffles at the ankle ready to give this life over or never see eternity. I sit in the chair and the pastor thanks Mama for her persuasion. The pastor is our uncle, and our uncle tells me in 2 weeks, I'm gonna be saved. In 2 weeks, this a renewed discipline, but still he's so stingy. This impatience for assurance leads me back. They get me ready in my come let us adore him. Mama tell me to take off my panties. She forgot to bring extra types of floss. At set time, I walk out from behind. The choir stands, the curtains open, the people scream. There's dead water bugs wrapped around fallen leaves from no sky. In the tub I'm in, my uncle recites the scripture, so it don't look like we live here for the good show. I watch them congregate over the sinning, as water rushes down the amen. My feet panicked because they can't touch an end. I envision modeled men, his hand holding nostrils, my mouth miracled. If I could sing, this wouldn't be loveless. If I could swim, I wouldn't die. The pastor is our uncle, and our uncle holds me under at a distance. The pastor is our uncle, and our uncle divests me of my volition. Back on land, I drip, I dribble, I cough up who I should have been. The people clap at how clean, how quickly my design has ripped their wants. An encore for me to swallow it better, hold it all in longer, say sorry for wasting my first 8 years of life. So this next two poems I'm going to read originally started in a documentary poetics course when I was in grad school, but like in those courses, they don't really tell you what documentary poetics is. You just kind of like figure it out. And like one of the assignments was to find something in Alabama for that semester to write about. And I wanted to write about Lonnie Johnson, who is the inventor of the Super Soaker. And it's still like the most successful toy ever. And so I was writing things with titles like the invention of the Super Soaker was a happy accident, which it really was. Like he started making this toy like in the backyard with his sister and his dad. And I was doing that, and the poems were okay. Like I was getting like the lineage of like where this toy stemmed from. And I was in grad school, and it was also like a very sad time in my life. And like the poems wasn't hitting me the way I wanted it to hit. And so like those titles I changed from the invention of the Super Soaker to the invention of the Super Sadness. And you know, when you're sad, it's all consuming. And so I just started writing poems like that. So these next I'm going to read are from the Super Soaker that turned into like the Super Sadness. The invention of the Super Sadness was an accident. Show me how to make fun things or happy accidents, how to open up Sis's dolls, see how she blinks without a lifeline. If I'm little, show me how to win games and become a burned boy who's present enough to keep standing in doorways without shoving. Show me my name in its prototype. Let me craft elastic. Let me be better, even with the fear of water. Even when I'm sent into planets to build bombs, to keep bums from obliterating these burdens. Show me how to shoot these niggas faster, fill up tubs, carry space packs, become fire that holds silly knuckles. Show me the crack at my head, recede from the filthy states of 50 wet states. Wave, wave, make me artless, make me barren. So the next Super Sadness, I said the next like it's multiple, it's only 2 Super Sadness poems in here, and I'm gonna read the next one. And this one, I'm not a big form girl, but not because I don't want to be, it's just I just don't know enough about poetry. Like I kind of fell into poetry, and so now I'm learning like form, and what I learned is that this next poem I'm reading is considered a list poem. And I'm trying to figure out how I want to read it. It's like one of the poems that like depends on the rhythm. So I'm gonna test it out. And it's titled The Super Sadness Feels Like Anger, which feels like. So this is called. The super sadness feels like anger, which feels like foreskin, a default setting, stomach churns after midnight, dry eyes, Sunday morning worship, hesitation at an intersection, changed passwords, premature adulthood, missed deadlines, fitted sheets, freelancing, yes maybe, momentum, ashy knuckles, hypervigilance, corn stuff stuck in between my gap, a sucked in stomach, sinking, infantile embroidery, showtime, the next step, primary colors, my pocketbook, learned behavior, an exit, intermediate hand gripping, when my grandmother was supposed to turn 100 yesterday, but forgot all them years ago, resolution, yardsticks, small talk, an incubator, groupthink, a Ferris wheel, melodrama, accidentally swallowing water at the bottom of a 3-foot pool, meaning to swallow water at the bottom of a 3-foot pool, not drowning, sex sometimes, compulsive eating, a fed family, liquidated compensation, weakened breaths after walking up a flight of steps, a glitch, controlled air conditioning, method acting, a book release party, crashing, an accessory, writing what I do and wishing I felt better, staying together, I'll air all this shit out, thighs chafing, losing my life, gnats in the kitchen, cotton candy, the end of throwaway, 6:35 headed to Mesquite, light voices, black exploitation and isolation, everything, hyphenated, promotion, an expiration date, my idle and morning state, an organization, getting to know you, room temperature water and the sun is out, a fan blowing hot air, what I've always wanted. Down to the super sadness forms. Okay, so this next one is about fishing with my actual dad. It's one of the things I'm very, very grateful that he taught me to do. Not that I do it often. I did it a lot as a child whenever I would go to Houston to visit him. And if you fish, you know, it's like it's the greatest thing ever. And I wish I can go like right now. If I can find a poem, I will read it to y'all, I promise. I like said, okay. Practical life skills. We pull up to the dock with 3 picnic chairs as crickets chirp, sit close to water on wood till sunrise. I tell fish to hush, quiet down, so I can hear about hydrated hierarchies, not fins flapping to remain wet. I tell you, it's like they know what's about to happen. You hand me the pole, the automatic one for my child hand barely bummed. One push of a button, I learned how to secure shrimp around the hook. This is our father-daughter dance. I hook and hook. Make sure those shrimp are safe and dead when they hit salt's loophole. Repeat until no more are in the bucket. Cause worms ain't gonna never give me nothing worth cooking up. We came out here for a reason, not to pretend we enjoy each other's company. I watch fish hop around in dark matter water and wonder what it would be like to live away from a cliff. Then you catch a blowfish and bang its head up against the concrete. On top of the dock, we watch it die. You didn't have to kill it. You throw it in an empty cooler. We continue hooking. I share all your names. Come on, we could snap. It's like church, you know? Okay. So the next set of poems I'm going to read are 2 poems that mirror each other. It's the exact same poem with like a little bit changed in the midst of it. And the goal, anybody in here is a fan of the show Naked and Afraid? Like raise your hand if you've seen Naked and Afraid. Okay, great. So if you've seen Naked and Afraid, you know it's like peak white people shit. Like it's literally like that should be the title of the show. And like the premise of the show is like it's usually mostly white people. It's very rare that you see a black or brown face on the show. So when you do see it, you have to watch it because you're like, how they gonna survive? But anyways, they like throw like these people who claim to be like survivalists into places like the desert, the safari, the Arctic. And when you go, you stay, sometimes it's 21 days, sometimes it's 28. Like the extreme people stay like 45 days. And when you go, you get naked. You're naked the entire time and you're supposed to survive in like these extreme measures and you get like a partner to like do this with you. And it's usually male, female. and you just see it like go, like disintegrate day by day. And like it's supposed to, you get an option to bring like one survival tool. And a lot of people pick things like machetes and, you know, like things to build shelter. You get one, each person gets one. But like, if you do not bring a pot to boil water in, a lot of those people do not make it, because if you don't drink clean water, like you can literally like die. And so like we see where they mess up from the jump. Like if you don't bring a pot, we're like, oh, we know how this gonna go, like they'll be gone. And so what I wanted to do is like write 2 poems juxtaposing like a reality show, because you know reality shows are scripted. It's not really real, but yeah. And also like juxtapose that with actual reality of people who actually need water, i.e. like people in Flint, Michigan, and how like we can watch this show and like they can get saved without having like the proper tools to have the water, but like it's actual people in our actual reality who are like dying daily. And so I wrote 2 poems called Naked and Afraid and Afraid and Naked. And so I'll just read those to y'all. And I think I got like maybe 2 more after that. All right. Naked, y'all should watch the show though. Like if you don't watch the show, I promise you it's like so fascinating. It's amazing. It's amazing, but it's like horrible and trash, but it's good. It's like hate watch it. Yeah. Okay. Naked and Afraid. One of the biggest challenges, I can't speak. One of the biggest challenges contestants face on the show is finding drinkable water. Out in deserts and forests, they strip down with only machetes and mosquito nets for protection against the wild unknown. The real survivalists, they bring pots. If they're lucky, they set up shelter by an open stream, stay close to water, and stay alive. If unlucky, they dig for traction from a tree trunk where it takes its time finding frequency. In both cases, water must be boiled or your insides crumble. Dirty water rips through the surface for 21 days. It's no way to water test a script. When contestants without pots get desperate, they drink straight from the source. This last hope results in projectile vomiting into fallen tree trunks, excreting diarrhea in front of millions of watchers, and in extreme cases, having to be evacuated from the show. Drinking from contaminated waters leads to intestinal infections, E. coli, lead poisoning, parasites, pesticides, and pathogens. Now, quiet bodies fill themselves with impurities. Everyone knows you can't drink bad water. When waters are wrong, they might as well swallow spit. Their bodies shrinking to unnatural smallness. But ain't this all the things we was told would make us better? To watch them die when we know there's always enough clean water nearby. Right. Afraid and naked. One of the biggest challenges citizens face is finding drinkable water. Out in the streets and kitchens, they strip down with only plastic bottles and sewers for protection against the wilderness of government sanctions. The real survivalists, all of them, have mastered the use of a pot. If lucky, they bathe themselves in hometown tubs that night. If unlucky, they don't bathe at all. In both cases, water must be boiled or your insides crumble. Dirty water guts them from the inside out for 5 years. It's no way to water test the system. When citizens without pots get thirsty, they don't have options. This American way results in bodies of children, a news story, and in extreme cases, residents plead for showmanship, then evaporate. Drinking from contaminated waters leads to Legionnaire's disease, lethal pneumonia, abandonment, dehydration, paranoia. Now, quiet bodies fill themselves with impurities. Everyone knows you can't drink bad water. When waters are wrong, we felt their survival, their bodies shrinking like their population. But ain't this all the things we was told would make us better? To watch them die when we know there's always enough clean water nearby. So the last poem I'm gonna read is called When I Eulogize Our Father. One thing about poets, they gonna write a poem about their daddies. Like, that's just gonna happen. Yeah, okay. So when I eulogize our fathers, the reason we have gathered here today is because I know how it looks when our father loves something. His Cadillac, his bullets, his garden, his weed, his tractor, his dogs. The first time I saw him cry, the damn dog died. And after he cried every time he saw me, it felt like thousands of tears ran into my toes as I watched him collapse over a corked mouth. I felt so sorry for seeing. Each time our father's eyes ached for more breath and no bleeding. The way my mouth mumbled the morning our beast met. Out in the front yard, how his tried to tear the meat from my paw. There was a leak, a war of risk I got from riding in that Cadillac casket. He ashed each held hand thing there, then forgot to show up. Through an open window, the dust landing on my cheek like another tameless thing. I've swallowed oxy and oxygen because of this love. I know it was the blood. I know it was the blood. Y'all don't be going to church like y'all be claiming of me. Our father never offered no loyalty to the child, only ultimatums of wildflowers or respect, and I decline both. If you ever have to down a shot of something brown with your maker, it ain't polite. All it ever wants is to see a mother's hornet coated against the clear. Once we died off of its clarity, and I danced in front of the TV, barely aware of the bruise expanding through the towel. We cooked meals there often. It's how the walls wrapped around our father are my teeth, undomesticated, dense, lockjawed through entire legacies. Eventually, he just closed his eyes. Traditionally, I've always been hard to forgive. Thank y'all. Oh, you got a question, you can go ahead. Hey, Ashley.
So your nonfiction is very poetic, as has been said already. So I'm just wondering if you talk about how the process differs for you writing prose versus poetry, or if there is a difference.
Mhm.
And you said earlier you fell into poetry. Tell us who pushed you.
Okay. Okay, so the first half of that question, the difference between writing and nonfiction and poetry for me, I think the biggest difference is the amount of pressure that I put on myself. With essay writing, because I started out like writing creative nonfiction, it was just like a lot of like pressure I put on myself to make it feel different than what I read in terms of creative nonfiction, but also to like tell a complete story. So it's way more time consuming. I could say that it's way more because it's so many words, it's hard for me to find like an entryway into like the actual like root of the story that I'm trying to tell. And so I would say like the biggest difference is when I write poetry, I kind of like let go of my inhibitions and like just write from my heart. And with creative nonfiction, I'm writing from my head. And I want to write from my heart with creative nonfiction, but I think like poetry has allowed me to figure out like that disconnect with creative nonfiction. So that would be the biggest difference. And what pushed me into writing poetry was when I started to actually read poetry, because I always saw poetry like on the stage, like spoken word, you know, deaf poetry jam and things like that. I think like when I got into a classroom and like began to like study the genre, and I actually like found poets who I like to read, because I didn't know how to read poetry for a long time. I was like, this is boring, like I don't get it. And then one day you get a line that like just hit you in your spirit, and you're like, I want to recreate that. And so for me, like I was in Lamar's class. You know Lamar, hey Lamar. And we were reading Danette Smith's "Don't Call Us Dead," and that was like one of the first times like I read a poetry collection that like made sense to me and like that I wanted to emulate and like mirror in some kind of way. So that's what pushed me, like learning to love to read poetry.
Hi,
Okay. Hey.
hey, my name's Trish Evans and I'm with the MFA program at the W. How did you have I don't know if it's gumption, or how are you able to stand up to the voices of the church and the disapproval and the mothers and all that and speak your authentic voice? I love it. It resonates with me on so many levels, and I just felt like the power of your voice shone through in your writing when you were reading those pieces.
Thank you for that. Okay, it's gonna sound crazy because like I said, I went to church every other day for like 16 years of my life, and even in the midst of that, I was rebelling in it. So like I think I had an early start of like just speaking what I wanted to say and like being like the little rebel child in the church. Like if I had stockings on, I would like rip holes into them because I'm like, what do you mean I have to wear stockings? Like they itch and I don't want to do it. And it was like, and I noticed like very early on as a child, like no matter what I did, it would be, what was that? It would be an issue. I realized that like very early on that like I couldn't perform perfection for like I said, I grew up in a Southern Baptist church, and it's a very small church where like everybody knows each other. It's like a little house of a church. And so they saw me grow up, and like they had like expectations of how I should dress, how I should wear my hair, how I should speak, and how I should participate in the midst of that. And I would always be like, nah, man, like this ain't it. Like I just knew it wasn't me. If that makes sense. I knew like it would kind of like hawk my voice, and I'm a Sagittarius, and you know Sagittarius has got to tell you they Sagittarius is, but like Sagittarius, like they're very independent, like they gonna do what they want to do, and I've been like that since a child. So when I started writing like these poems that centered the church, I didn't really feel fear of it because like I would have these conversations with my mama, like I'm not coming back here. Like I would have those conversations like I'm gonna wear jeans, like you can't tell me I can't wear pants, and things like that. So it was very easy to like translate that voice on the page. Yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Hey.
I noticed in your acknowledgments, you mentioned like a whole paragraph on like Kim Little Wood, like no sweatshirt and Speedo.
Yes.
And I was wondering, kind of like ask you a question, like did music play a big part in your poetry process of like essays?
Yes, I love that question. And I probably should have answered Ashley's question with like what pushed me into poetry, because like the real answer is songwriting. Like I always been obsessed with like songwriting and like reading lyrics and like CD packages growing up. And I think like when I would read those lyrics, they like evoke like some kind of unspoken language that I didn't know how to find access into. I'm always thinking of like words and things like that. Like it's literally always on my mind. So when I think of like Smino, for instance, y'all don't know what Smino is, listen to Smino. Smino like creates like his own sort of language in like his raps. It's like a rap singing thing. It's also like a hybrid form of music, which I like try to do in my poetry and in my nonfiction. And so music plays an absolute big part in like how I go about line breaks. I always think of things like pauses. I'm really big on the pause, and I think like with music, if I hear somebody pause at like a certain section of a song, it creates another story in the midst of like that silence. And so like with line breaking for me, I just want to, sometimes I overdo it. I just want to break the line and see how many like double entendres that I can create, or like how many multiple storylines that I can create with like a line break. So yeah, 100%. Thank you.
How you doing, Kia?
I'm good, mama.
My question is, what made you title your poetry the collection play? That's my first question. And my second question is, did you ever feel like a collection play, or did not put your money in the collection?
Okay. I answer your second question first. No, I didn't steal because I ain't had no money. I was broke. I didn't have money to put in it because I was a kid. Like you would give me $1 and then be like, put that in there, and I put it in. I've seen people steal out of the collection plate. But no, I haven't stolen the church's money. And I named it the collection plate because, like I said, a lot of these poems deal with water. And yeah, I'm trying to think of why did I name it that? Yeah, I think I was thinking about like things like water and sex and family and lineage have like taken from me, but also what I've put into it, and how like that duality kind of like collides a lot of times. So I just named it the collection plate because it's a symbol of the church, but it's also a symbol of like beginnings and endings. Like a lot of times like we're fundraising for this, a lot of times it's like we need you to give this to God. So like just that give and take and like that duality. So that's why I named it the collection plate.
Anyone else coming up to the mic? I don't want to jump on.
Yeah, this is one person right before you.
Okay.
So, question I have is, other than music, what inspires your form, specifically for the poem Let's Leave, where the words all start to jumble together? What specifically inspired that?
Yeah, that's a great question. That poem that you're talking about, Let's Leave, it's just like a lot of words like jumbled on top of each other. And I saw it done, like I said, Danae Smith. I saw it done and Don't Call Us Dead. And it was like my blood, but like the entire page was just like my blood on top of each other, my blood, my blood, my blood. And I was like, oh, what is this? Like, what is this? Like, they ain't tell me this form. And so like, of course, the best form of flattery. And I just like sat down, and that poem, Leslie, was like originally 3 smaller poems on 3 different pages, and it was trash. It was trash. I was just like, oh, I don't like that. And I put it all on like one document, and I just started like trying to overlap it. You know, like when you're a kid and they have Microsoft Word, but it was also like another app. I want to say it was like Notebook or something where like you can insert shapes and things like that. And I kind of thought about that, and I was like, I never think I'm in doc all the time, and I never think like, how can I always think like what line break I can do to like change the narrative, but I never think like what I can do visually and like aesthetically to do it. And then I thought of like that my blood, and I was like, how can I do that my way with using like sentences and things like that, and like how would I read it? I think it was like a challenge to myself of like how I would read this aloud, and I still don't know how to read it aloud, which I probably will never read it at a reading. But like I like the way it looks, and a lot of things for me is like I gotta like the way it looks for me to even like food. Like if it don't look good, but it's probably like the best tasting dish ever, I'm not gonna eat it because it look weird. But yeah, thank you for that question.
Hey, so I love your energy. My name is Alana from the MFA program, and honestly, if I were there, I don't know if I would ask as many questions I've been asking today, because you know I got to go to the mic and stuff, and it's just so easy to hit that unmute button. But so that had me thinking about my space, right? Taking up space, and that I'm trying to connect that back to you. So when you write as a poet, how do you go about thinking about your space and how you take up your space through your poetry? Because I one of the things I noticed with the way you use space on the page is that you really go for it. So I'm just curious about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'm both very like grateful, but like very resentful to the fact that like I started to like care so passionately about like poetry later than anything else. Like I was in school for creative nonfiction. So like I said, I came around to poetry and I found things that I like. And I think it's worked in my favor because like I said, I didn't know a lot about form. So I was just sort of like doing what I wanted to do on the page. Like if you told me to write a sonnet right now, I would be like, what we finna do? Like, I don't know. Like I wouldn't know, but I want, like, now I'm in the process of like actually studying those forms. So I think like when you see a lot of white space on the page, it's literally just me trying to figure out what I'm doing in like real time. And like I said, like line breaks help me do that. Also reading it aloud, like when I read like the things that I write aloud, I can find that pause better, and I can find out like where I want like the reader to take a rest and like where I want the reader to kind of create like their own thing. And also I'm a big note taker reading anything, and sometimes I just want white space so like the reader can like write little notes in on the side. I do that with all the poets I love. So hopefully like I can recreate that a little bit. Yeah, I hope I answered your question. I'd be rambling. So like you asked me one question and I had got lost. I'm sorry.
That's fine. You can ramble on. I love your answer. So and you're very insightful. So I really appreciate your answer. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Anybody else have a question? Thank y'all so much. And I hope y'all have like a great rest of your day. Thank you.
All right, that's a wonderful precursor to our prize celebration. Each year for the past several years, we have awarded the Eudora Welty Ephemera Prize for high school writing to 5 high school students from around the state of Mississippi. We do not rank them 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's all the same prize. It can be essays, it can be stories, and it can be poems that are submitted. Our 2 judges were 2 of our readers for this afternoon, Annette Saunook Clapsaddle and Kendra Allen, who you just heard. They got to read about 44, I think, high school submissions of poetry, fiction, and essay, and selected 5 winners and 5 honorable mentions. If you were one of the honorable mentions, I'm going to ask you to come up to the stage now just to save a little bit of time. I know not every one of our honorable mentions is here, but I will read everyone's name because we do want them recognized. Let's go ahead and come up if you're one of the honorable mentions. The first, this is in alphabetical order, honorable mention, who will be published on our website in the Ephemera Prize anthology. That will be available in a little while as soon as we can get that out there. First is Jordan Brown for the essay, If Anything Happens to Me. The next is Jasmine Henry for the essay, The Inevitable. And I believe the others are not with us, but if I'm wrong, wave. Jacob McGee for the poem, Why Faith and Not Sight. Okay. Megan Waits for the story, Blindsided. And Lachlan Wilczynski for the poem, A Monument of Sunshine. Thank you, guys. And then our Ephemera Prize winners have been invited to read their prize winning entry, again in alphabetical order. The first is to Jordan Isbell for the poem, Okolona, Mississippi, the little city that does big things. And if our other Ephemera Prize winners want to stack yourselves up in the wings, you can, you might have a shorter walk when it's your time.
I just knew I would be first. I knew it. So, like he said, I wrote a poem that's basically a letter to my hometown called Okolona, Mississippi, and the little city that does big things, that's his slogan. And I included it in the title because I meant to use it in an ironic sense because ever since I've been there, they haven't really been trying to, I say, improve on anything, even though there are like so many gifted minds from that hometown like myself. So this is my poem. Never forget where you came from. That is my town's local boogeyman's calling card, uttered as they kidnapped the Roman kids from 3 blocks away and tortured them into revenants that walked past the house with a sign that reads, "The Chandler Home, circa 1850, and write it off as a historical site, without realizing that their ancestors, who they saw only through dust-riddled photo albums, were victims of the broken foundation of my town's heritage, a foundation imitated by the cracking slabs that masquerade as a sidewalk that the Roman kids from 3 blocks away can safely walk on. The kids on each side narrowly escaped the forsaken adage, denying the cause of their grandmothers who blame it on living in the country with no damn service, ignoring the pastime activities of transforming soil-ridden fingers that learned to make mud cakes in 5 minutes into the world's greatest gun duel, all to make room for a northern identity, one that rids the stench of banana pudding hidden at the back of Granddad's fridge and infects the kids with amnesia, causing them to forget the town's name, only referring to it as the place 20 minutes away from Tupelo. My town loves to call me an outsider, claiming my unorthodox method of spreading lead across the college application rather than spreading lead across a nearby corner of divided flag colors makes me unprepared for their world. A world where God's disciples find the cheapest Bible book to recite a few proverbs and declare themselves sanctified. A world where abandoned buildings tattered with annual graffiti make public headlines for a last-minute party. A world where the Roman kids from 3 blocks away remember to wear only black clothes across Avenue Street after forgetting a Y-intercept on their math test. I write to the unresponsive town, asking if it is happy of its abusive nature, if the gunshots from the alleyways are loud enough to drown out the nagging voices of the elderly, if the teen pregnancy is high enough to finally double the town's population, if the compact apartments that stay on 1 block can finally bring people in. I don't expect an answer, an outcome I try to find peace in as I pass the lowered US flags around the town that droop in shame of its current state, leaving themselves to the Roman kids from 3 blocks away who stab holes into the stars and leave only 13 present, which to them describes their superhero persona, as they snatch the flags from the splinter poles and place them on their backs, pretending to be their own superhero in order to find an identity my town failed to give them.
Our second Ephemera Prize goes to Kendra Bedell for the poem, The Lockdown.
Hello, everyone. Okay. Today I will be reading my poem, The Lockdown. Before I start introducing my poem, I want to give a special thanks to MEW for giving us the opportunity and supporting young writers. This poem is inspired by a tragic reality in America, school shootings. The poem is a real event I had experienced in around 8th or 9th grade, and this was when I was around 14 or 15. So here's the lockdown. The lockdown. The bells rang.
I started to enter class, Mississippi Studies. I sat down and took out my book. Mississippi is great, they say. Go to school in Mississippi, they say. It would be safe to go to school here in the South. Code black. The books and pencils were scattered on the floor. The teacher said to hide. The teacher the teacher locked the doors. The teacher kept looking out the window. The teacher looked pale, as if she were hiding something. The teacher says, shh, do not say a word. I hid in a corner, hoping the man would not find me. Thank you.
The next Ephemera Prize goes to J.B. Snodgrass for the story, The Word of the Lord.
Hi, everyone. I didn't really prepare anything to say before my piece, but I usually write poetry. That's my favorite medium, but over the summer, I got a job at a test writing company, and my lovely boss gave me permission to use the story I wrote for that company for this competition. So this is the word of the Lord. With Brother Schultz's droning, preacherly voice slowly fading into the background of my mind, the growing picture of my New York City neighborhood taking its place became crisper and more defined. Tenement fire escapes zigzag skyward, cracks in the sidewalk make hopscotch for the local kids. My mother waters the banana plants on the iron landing outside our window. I could almost believe I was back there again. Jacob. Jacob. Grandma's sharp voice woke me from my reverie. Nails on a chalkboard. I winced. Yeah, Grandma, what is it? Don't you yeah, Grandma, me. You say yes, ma'am, right now, you hear? Yes, ma'am. What's the matter? Don't you play dumb, boy. You're falling asleep in church again, and I won't have it. I expect the Lord doesn't care too much, I replied with a grin. Well, how are you going to know what the Lord do and don't care about if you're asleeping while he's talking? Grandma retorted. If the Lord wanted me awake, I figured he'd woken me up himself. It was getting awful hot in the tiny church. Every one of the 12 double-hung windows was open as wide as could be, but the chance of a breeze that didn't feel like Satan breathing down my neck was slim to none, and the little paper fans stuck in between the hymnals on the backs of the pews were no match for the brutal Mississippi heat. A mosquito buzzed annoyingly close to my left ear. I had noticed none of this when wrapped up in my New York daydream, and I longed to return to it. But it was slipping away from my mind, just like the minnows that slipped through my fingers when I tried to catch them barehanded in the creek behind Grandma and Grandpa's house. I tugged at the tie around my neck. The word of the Lord, came Brother Schultz's voice. Thanks be to God, the parish responded. Lately, I hadn't been thanking God for much. Mama and Daddy had decided I needed to rediscover my roots and connect with my relatives, so they shipped me back to the Mississippi Delta to live with Grandma and Grandpa for the summer. Try to understand them, Mama had said. They're your family too, all those folks down in Cleveland. I didn't see the family resemblance. I was miserable. I missed my friends, Aaron and Esperanza, Luis and Katie. I even missed my whiny baby sister, Grace. I wanted to wander the streets of New York with them, not be trapped in the middle of nowhere in a house that still didn't have air conditioning. I may have been born here, but we moved when I was 3. This isn't my home. I don't come from any place but New York. When we got home from church, Grandpa and I sat on the screen porch with our shirts off and tall glasses of lemonade in hand, the only way to cool off unless you felt like taking a swim in the muddy creek. Why doesn't this place make me feel like I'm home again? I asked. Well, that's quite a question all of a sudden like, he replied, eyebrows raised. I reckon you got to figure that out yourself, but maybe I can help just a little. He and I pulled on fresh shirts, and in a moment we were bouncing down the road in his beat-up 1962 C10, headed for the Mississippi River. And 20 minutes later, there it was, stretching across the horizon, a vast expanse of brownish-green water, hundreds of yards wide. Beyond it, Arkansas. My breath caught in my throat. I had seen big rivers before, the Hudson, the East, but this was different. The sun caught the tips of the waves, a million fairies dancing on the water. Mystical. You know, your great-grandpa was a ferryman, took people back and forth across the river to McGee. I think he's got a name on a ferryman's memorial somewhere around here, Grandpa rambled. We took some back roads and parked the C10 under a cypress near the bank. Slowly, I climbed out. The sight of the river had stirred something in me. I began to stumble towards it, hesitantly at first, then faster and faster, ripping off my shoes and socks as I ran, until I was sprinting into the shallow water at the edge. Grandpa, I'm getting it. I think I'm getting it now. Grandpa just stood by the truck and smiled his big, sideways smile. My feet sank into the mud that my ancestors could have stood in. What would that old ferryman think of his great-great-grandson come all the way back from the big city just to stand where he stood? Jesus, I whispered, a whole prayer contained in one word.
Our fourth Ephemera Prize winner is Emma Spinks for her poem, Mississippi.
I asked for a step stool. They don't have one. So you can tell your friends that you watched a talking head read a poem today. I wrote this poem because I feel a lot of people my age have mixed feelings about this state. They love it, but they hate it. So this is a letter to Mississippi, and you can't tell, but it is in the shape of Mississippi. So here we go. Mississippi, you hold me back. You give me opportunities. You make me hide half of me. You show me that I can still stay true to my roots, even if I hold shame. You disgust me. Your people spout hateful things, but maybe I shouldn't blame just you. Your people default to ignorance and hate, and what could you possibly do to stop it? Only they can change as you sit and watch the fighting in either disgust or satisfaction. I do not know how your mind works, and yet you enchant me. Your music and culture sing slowly, deliberately, hauntingly in my ears. I want to leave you behind, erase you from my past, and forget every memory we ever shared. But I want to stay. I want to stay with you because I know you'd never let me forget. Never let me forget your sweet swamp song, raging rivers and croaking frogs and whispering winds and squelching mud. Never let me forget the gravelly voices rising to the sound of twanging guitars, echoing with the thrum of a pulsating crowd as they all sit together in your hot, sticky, humid heat. Never let me forget the fields tumbling in green waves. Never let me forget the smell and taste of my home fried chicken and boiled crawfish and simmering gumbo. And when it's finally time to say goodbye, salt tears will bleed from my eyes into your muddy waters, feeding the gators and the fishermen and the blues and into everything that means anything to you.
And our fifth Ephemera Prize winner is Benjamin Tabor for the essay, What a Hunter Hears.
Afternoon, y'all. Got a short little essay, personal narrative rather, for y'all here, so let's just get into it. When I was young, everyone was a hunter. Every family member I could name, and every one of them that I couldn't, expected me to be a wonderful hunter. Every child in my family received a BB gun when they graduated from kindergarten, and my younger cousin got a rifle for her 8th birthday, and every member of my family over the age of 13 had killed a buck. So when my father said that he would take me hunting for the first time for my birthday, I was expected to be overjoyed. I dreaded the trip for weeks. If hunting was an art form, my father was the Picasso of blood. He stood a little over 6 foot tall with tree trunks for arms and a razor blade for a brain. He was always laughing, sweating, or both. He had a reputation for being the biggest, most respected person in the room, and perhaps most importantly, he was a better hunter than most of my family. That Friday evening, we loaded up his truck and drove to the camp. The deteriorating camp roads went up and down a series of hills, coating the truck with dust from the peaks and mud from the valleys. We arrived in time for an evening hunt, and I hastily pulled on a camouflage jacket and a pair of rough jeans. We drove Dad's ATV for maybe half an hour up a winding and rugged trail. We rode in relative silence for the first 10 minutes or so before letting the crickets be our radio. The trees huddled tightly together like they had something to fear. Slowly, however, the trees thinned out and we could see past the foliage on both sides. The forest extended far off to the left, and on our right, an abrupt drop, maybe 4 stories deep, into our river 150 yards wide. The drop was maybe 5 feet at its farthest from us, and at one point I could have stuck my hand out over the ledge. It was the most beautifully terrifying sight I'd ever seen. The trail diverged from the river, instead following a small stream a few feet away and proceeding deeper into the woods. Dad began to slow the ATV down, and it came to a creeping halt, maybe 50 yards from the plot. He meticulously eased down off the ATV, lifted his gun and pack, and motioned for me to do the same. I, with as much stealth as the little boy could muster, clambered off the ATV, hoisted my bag, and after nearly dropping it, slung my rifle over my shoulder. Despite the leaves crunching beneath our feet, we managed to stealthily approach the shooting house at the closer end of the plot. It was a wooden hut, maybe 7 feet off the ground, that couldn't fit 2 grown men. Dad and I squeezed ourselves into the shooting house, sat down in the 2 withered plastic chairs, and waited. I learned something about my father while we sat in that little hut and waited for the sun to set. I learned where he practiced his patience. We sat for 4 hours, trying to breathe slowly and limit the creaking of the house. Dad barely moved during those 4 hours, simply taking a small sip of water near the beginning. Once the sun had begun to set, Dad spoke for the first time since we had settled, simply explaining that we were going to wait to stay out after dark to gauge how well I could see. I watched as the creature emerged from the back of the plot, maybe 100 yards away. Her gray beige coat looked orange in the setting sunlight, and her big black eyes surveyed the field, suspicious of the peas and ryegrass that grew in the open space. She walked out, quiet as a mouse, onto the edge of the plot. After a moment of waiting, even I could hear the soft chomp, chomp, chomp of her eating away at the grass. Dad lowered his head slightly and whispered. My father identified her as old, due to the more gray fur and lack of companions, and as a good size for eating. He told me to creep my rifle out the little screen hole and take her. So I, silently as possible, eased my rifle out the window and began to slow my breathing. Shaking uncontrollably, I turned the safety off, bottomed out my breath, and lined up the crosshairs of that rifle with her front quarter. I didn't let my eyes sway from that spot as I eased back my shuddering finger. I don't remember the bang or jerking upwards during the shot. I don't remember the strength of the rifle's kick. I don't remember the man's words. I barely remember the fury present in his voice as he ripped the gun from my hands and moved me down the steps. I remember her screams, though. I remember finding her in a hole a dozen feet from the plot with a bullet wound in her hindquarters and blood matting her back half. I remember the flies that swarmed, the red of her blood and the brownish pink of her intestine. I remember a rifle, strangely familiar, being shoved into my hands. I remember when I raised that rifle, shooting her wasn't a process. There was no breathing or precision, just another gunshot, another wasted bullet. Dad claims there's not enough meat left to be worth skinning, and he tossed her in the gut pile for the coyotes. A few years later, I decided to go hunting again. I felt the same up and down of those dirty hills, was rendered speechless by that same view of the river, and wore those same camo pants. I was plagued by that same creaking of that old house, and that same memory of her screams. I guess that everyone hears her screams.
I'd like to thank the 5 Ephemera Prize winners and everyone who submitted to the Ephemera contest, including our honorable mentions. And I'd like to thank you all for being here today. I welcome you back tomorrow morning at 9:30 when we'll begin again with poet Thomas Richardson, our Welty Prize winner, Casey Kaiser, Josh Russell, and Lee Durkee. We'll have another great program for you in the morning. Hope you have a great evening, a great afternoon. If you're going to the Welty Gala, I may see you there. Thank you.